Hi, everybody. John Haldy here, and I am super excited to have with me Pat McKay and Tyler Tattum, the CEO and COO of Rolling Equity Leasing, also known as REL to those who are familiar with it. Pat and Tyler, welcome.
Thanks, John.
And what makes me totally psyched about this is they've both agreed to let me pick their brains to better understand the business model behind REL. Because the more I've learned about it, the more fascinated I've become, and the more I've realized they were amazingly thoughtful about what they were trying to do and the way that they serve the TSP community. And now I'm thinking maybe that's secret sauce, but beyond the TSP community. Don't answer if you can't. But I really want to dive into how you figured out the way to set up the business and how you've had success in making so many people happy in this community. But at the same time, I want to talk later about why there's some people out there who don't understand REL and haven't figured out all the good stuff that you got going. Is that fair game, guys?
Sure.
So just to get some basics out of the way, you two weren't ever TSPs, were you?
No.
But you've got purple blood in your veins, right?
Yeah. So Tyler and I have really spent 33 years together now at different trucking companies. About half of that at FedEx, and then Schneider and Roadrunner, and participated in everything from really terminal management all the way through regional directors, divisional roles, sales, operations. And lease purchase programs within two of those three companies, and obviously heavily engaged with the early models at FedEx on their leases.
And you guys, if I'm remembering the story right, 2020 was your start date, right?
Correct.
May 1st, coming up 5 years.
What made you think of equipment leasing, and why start in the FedEx line haul space?
Tyler, you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, when we went back to, so we go back to Roadrunner 2016, Roadrunner was going through a pretty significant change and trying to get more performance financially out of things that were really important. So maintenance and leasing and fuel, a lot of the things that we've adopted here within REL. And we had spent the last few years working with a lot of national players in relation to leasing products, and we just felt like we could do it better. And so we actually started an internal leasing product within Roadrunner in 2017, and we spun it off when they started to divest around 2019, and we just looked at the things that we did that were successful for the independent contractors that we worked with. Equity in a truck, maintenance support, fuel discounts, and providing the capabilities that at the end of the day save them time and money every day. It was about at the same time that we started to build REL that we recognized FedEx, who Pat and I both worked for about 18 years, were going through a very significant transition in the safety technology requirements. And it was, quite honestly, just a perfect fit. We had great knowledge and experience. We had a very successful plan around a leasing product that was good for the industry. And we set our sights and focused on the FedEx TSPs. And it's been a great story ever since.
Yeah, John, one of the things I would tell you that's really important in our story is the experience Tyler and I have had for 30 years in leasing, whether that was in the early days where we would have to participate in contract signing and lease contract signing in our first terminal careers, or the lease purchase program that Tyler established within Roadrunner. Was in the trucking business generally. Internal lease purchase programs are not necessarily for the benefit of the lessee. they're very heavily weighted towards the lessors. In a lot of cases, the trucking companies who are leasing their first run equipment, and leases that are not through internal lease purchase type programs are generally incredibly expensive, and there's no path to equity. And what's important for Tyler and I was to recognize that our customers who are paying for these units need to get recognize the equity wherever that sits within the units in order to have the best uh, business long term. No question about it. Best opportunity for a trucker is to own their trucks, pay cash for their trucks, get rid of financing fees, have the negotiating power to be able to do so. But it takes cycles to get there. And there are times when you'd rather leave the dry powder off, keep it, and finance depending on your business cycles, so that there's always this need for a good, healthy lease product that ultimately gets the customer the equity that they deserve, much like financing.
When I think about the dynamics of what you're doing, though, an easy one that jumps to mind of places where you can help customers and make money at the same time is, I'm guessing, with the hundreds and hundreds of trucks that you buy, you get a significant discount compared to somebody who's buying 3 trucks a year, right?
Correct.
So that's
Correct.
one point. I'm guessing, too, because of the size of your operation, you're going to wholesale lenders. If you think of capital as a product, you're buying your money cheaper than somebody who buys 2 trucks a year can get the money, right?
Most likely.
And in many cases, I would think that just like the discount you get on the trucks, you guys have to make some money, but you're able to still save money for someone buying a few at a time. Same thing with the money, that oftentimes you're getting better than they could get, even the rate that you end up charging the customer in the lease. Fair?
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I think that's really the structure that Tyler and I looked at was obviously scale is important. It's a little bit different with us in the approach. What Tyler and I looked at was we don't rely on the strength of the underlying fleet to do our pricing, regardless of whether it's the price of the truck or the price of the credit. We look at the underlying fleet or fleets as primarily around carrier and carrier stability, regardless of whether that's FedEx or think of company X, Y, and Z who also contract large fleets and have dedicated groups. If we believe in that fleet, and if we believe in the stability of that fleet, then from a credit profile perspective or a sales price perspective, to us, all that matters is that we get pricing that's highly competitive or better in most places than our guy that goes out and buys a truck a year or two and is probably paying very close to heavy retail, or a guy or gal that goes out and buys 40 trucks a year. We know that our pricing is competitive with those guys at all levels. Might be a bigger benefit for a smaller fleet that only buys 1 or 2 than it is for a fleet that might buy 20 or 30. But one of the things that's important for Tyler and I is to always look through those pricing schedules and recognize that we're selling at a competitive price regardless of that fleet size. And that's a really important tenet of how we looked at our business.
Yeah, and I think, John, to kind of add on that, we stay really close to many TSPs that buy their own equipment. And we work with probably 3, 4, or 5 different TSPs, both brand new and some with 30 years of experience, that help us identify the right spec that works for FedEx, whether it's a team sleeper or a day cab. And I would say we also share what we're buying our trucks for. And I would say our price with probably a fleet size average number of trucks about 30 is probably about the same price that we offer just on the their purchase price, our lease price of pretty much the equivalent of the same spec truck. What's different is everything else that we bring with it. We bring advanced technology that provides predictive maintenance, or provides probably the most advanced fuel economic data analysis that you can possibly find with Zonar. We have our 24/7 REL solutions. We provide national pricing on products, along with everything else that we provide from an insurance standpoint, fuel card, and other capabilities. So often you just look at, I paid $185, and you're buying it for $185, but that's the only difference. that's what's the same. The difference is everything else that's kind of built around the product itself.
And I want to come back to the overall value question in a little bit. But one of the things that I've been doing lately is researching how lenders look at the trucking space. And generally speaking, when they hear trucking, they're imagining an individual or an individual with a partner who are taking a truck and they're driving it all over the country. They're going on load boards on Monday to figure out what they're going to do that week. They're factoring their receivables to deal with the fact that they get paid in 120 days, but they got to eat today and pay for gas today. They got to deal with, fuel credit applications. They're not the savviest business people. They're subject to the spot market rates, all of those things. So lenders generally go bleh when they think about trucking, or they go sure and they jack the rates up to like credit card kind of feeling prices. Mm-hmm. Very infrequently do I run into someone in the lending space that understands that TSPs are a very different breed of animal. They have dedicated runs. They do the same thing regularly. They have predictability. They have all the safety stuff in there. They get paid net 7 basically by a Fortune 50 company. So they don't have a lot of the challenges that trucking does. But banks aren't equipped to subdivide their equipment lending group and deal with the pocket of FedEx TSPs because it's just to them a line item, trucking. And they have a credit model to apply to trucking. I have to assume that your lenders that are providing the capital, because I don't think it's out of your wallet, right?
Correct.
Your lenders, you've educated them and they've bought into the fact that this is a very different space.
Correct. Yeah, it's it's interesting, John, because I agree with what you just said. It's a very, very long-term play to get lenders of scale. We all know the stories of and different reasons for what's occurred over time within the trucking or bigger logistics space. I'll give you a great example. We are in early talks with a customer who's asked us to give them 40 trucks a month, and it's a big broker. That's not a great business model. It's highly desirable by 3PLs and brokers to have dedicated fleets. Every one of those guys will tell you, I wish I had 30 people running under my authority and dedicated and contracted directly to me until freight drops out of the market and rates plummet to $1.30 a mile. They want them all when they're $3 a mile, but they don't do well when they drop. Well, that's 90% of the market on the OTR side for the owner operators. That's 1 million plus guys that have to be financed out there that are running through that. That's what the banks know. They know trucking, and they have a good background in terms of what their experience levels are. The other thing with banks in a lot of cases, and you just think about the amount of capital that you're thinking about, banks need to lend a lot of money. They're not talking 10 million, 20 million, 50 million, 100 million. Banks need to lend a lot of money at large scale at lower rates in order to make that whole model work for them. So if you're just going to a bank and you're asking for a little bit of money, they're looking at it and saying, I can't take the risk. So I can if I'm going to charge you 15% interest. I can't if I'm going to charge you 9 or 8. So that's really what you're up against, I think, within the market. And to your point about FedEx, two different sides of the equation. Banks still don't have a recognition, or they don't have enough experience that they can get in front of their underwriters typically and get around the discussion of it being trucking. Regardless of how good they are or consistent they are or anything else, it's a hard discussion because it's transportation, it's the sector, and they are small businesses that they're lending to. They're not lending to, the big one.
If you go to a Ryder or Penske or one of the bigger names that people are familiar with in the leasing world, do they price their leases different for FedEx TSPs versus other types of trucking? Do they get that sophisticated?
We don't know. The only comparison we've had is when we've used them in the past. I mean, we used both of those products probably 8 to 10 years ago. And it was probably designed fairly similar, more full service, everything. We've looked at clients that have come to us and shared with what how their financials were set up, and I would say we're very, very similar. Outside of the fact we don't charge mileage, and we think of maintenance a little bit different. We think of it more as ownership and usage. But I think at the end of the day, you're getting a truck from both of us, and it's really about the type of service you get before, during, and certainly after that truck lease expires. That separates the two of us.
What I can tell you, John, is we've seen different pricing structures for different of our customers from the big nationals. So one fleet might be 5 trucks a year, and they have a pricing model, and another fleet might be 2, and they have a different pricing model.
Okay.
And it's different by region. So one in the Northeast might be a different model than one in the Midwest. We've got our theories. In the background, Tyler and I talk a lot about it. It gets to variability, and it gets to really. It's different than us. I talked about our truck pricing. If I'm going to lease a truck to you for X amount as a FedEx TSP, I'm going to lease that truck to Tyler as a FedEx TSP at the same amount. It's the same price, and I don't care if you're in California or if you're in Maine. Same thing applies for us from a credit perspective. If you pass our credit requirements, I'm not going to give you favorable rates because you're a little bit higher rated than Tyler. I'm going to give you both the same rates. The only thing that differs for us is how much you're willing to put down, which again reduces our risk and allows us to reduce the interest rate on those. So
I want to get to that in just a moment, because what I was going to say was my experience in looking at data from like Volvo Finance and BMO and other places, they get it for equipment lending. That's what they do. But I don't think they price differently for FedEx versus somebody hauling oil trucks or something like that, right?
No. And John, one thing I will say that differentiates us from the other national carriers is typically they will not even look at someone unless they have 3 to 5 years of experience within FedEx. Pat and I worked there for 18 years. We understand how it works. We understand the sub and the opportunity and the risk, and we take clients from the very first day.
And you even went so far. I loved it when you introduced the program where you'll help them onboard the trucks into FedEx.
Yes.
I don't know of anybody who has that capability. And from seeing the steps, it's like 18 steps. Like it's not easy stuff. But so Pat, you were talking about how, because if I take 3 TSPs with 3 different credit profiles and they go to a BMO or a Chase Bank or something like that, they're going to get different terms, right? Same with Ryder, Penske, whatever. Yours is binary, other than the down payment. Let's dig into that. Why did you choose to do it that way instead of saying, hey, you got 20 million in the bank and an 830 credit score, and you've got $40 in the bank and a 450 credit score? You just said you're either in or out. Can I learn more about where that thought process was?
Yeah, I think the approach when Tyler and I looked at it. So this is a little bit of inside ball, but we look at scaled corporations. We look at big corporations on the way that they've approached different things. And I'll just give you an example of a large carrier Tyler and I know. The reason their growth was one of the reasons their growth was very exponential for a very, very long time, and they're a major player now, is because they created solutions and products that allowed the consumer to feel like they had variability, like they were able to make the decision on how they were going to ship. Great example. Big Brown picks up at 5:30 every night, Monday through Friday, static. They're not going to change. That's your pickup time. But your operation and your packing operation goes till 7, and you want a later pickup time. The ability to flex to something like that and maybe push a window back and say, we can be at 7 or 7:15. Even though it's engineered and it's the only option that you're going to get, I'm not going to go till 9, I'm not going to go to midnight, whatever. It creates that sense that there's enough flexibility that I can work with them and cover my business needs. And that's a big part of this for us, looking at it to say, listen, we can be flexible in a lot of other stuff. We can be flexible with our customers when We can help support them as their business goes through cycles. We've done it. We do it a lot, almost to the point where we've got assignment and assumptions are a great example. If you're buying Tyler's business, for us, it's a digital document, one pager that we send to you along with the original lease, and you sign it, and it's 30 seconds, and that truck is now assigned to Tyler. As long as Tyler passes our credit, it's 30 seconds. Everybody else that we have worked with or talked with looks at it and says, I can't get my truck assumed by another guy unless I'm willing to stay on as a guarantor for the remainder of that lease, even though I'm not in the business anymore. If they let you do it at all, and that typically takes weeks or longer for somebody to negotiate that through. We looked at that as a part of the business for us. And a little part of this is the world is new and there's a lot more efficient products that we can use to help move along stuff like that. And Tyler and I make the decisions. So it's one of those where we looked at it and said, it's the type of thing that you have to offer flexible solutions for customers that you're not stuck on. The trick at that point then is, okay, how do you pull along banks? Because they're not comfortable necessarily. They always want to see what's underwriting the lease. So how do you have the relationship with the lenders that also allow you to do flexible things within that? And Tyler and I were built on that. It's what we really looked at the business and said, you're a commodity if you go in and you're just a leasing provider and don't provide the other solutions that helps them develop their business long term.
I've never owned a truck. I've never had to buy a truck. I understand the principles of leasing versus financing, buying it yourself. I run into people all the time who just say, leasing, no way. That doesn't make sense to me because leasing's a very, very big business in this country. What are they missing? Educate me, if you don't mind, on the value prop behind leasing. I think, Tyler, you've touched on a lot of it. You're partnering with them because you still own the equipment technically, so you're doing good behavior. Is that the way to think of it?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. There's a little bit more controlled costs. You know what you're going to pay every month. You pretty much know annualized about what your expenses are going to be. The biggest differentials that we bring is the relationship, right? When you're leasing with someone like, we'll just say REL, we have a support team that is there to basically assist you along the way and on the road 24/7. So when things happen and you're stuck in the side of the road, number one, making sure your driver is safe and in a position to get assistance. But then it's all the work after that. And typically, when you're buying a truck, you got a great relationship with the guy until you sign the document. And then in many cases, you never hear from him again. And even when you do have an issue, you try to go back and they don't remember your name. Our job is to make sure that your success is through that entire lease. And then it's really about being able to continue to manage your growth and how much are you going to have to put down. Typically today, if you're going to go out and buy a truck and pay $180,000 cash, very unrealistic. You're probably going to have to put down $10,000, $20,000. In some cases, we heard $40,000, which is taking cash right out of the bank, and you're still dealing with the same type of interest rates that you may get from us or from a local bank. So we try to minimize your down payment. We try to balance out your cost every single month, and then we work to wrap around the support and service to make sure that you're running, and when you're not, you get back up as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and John, just to carry through with that, one of the things that Tyler and I talked about is you talk about these differences in what makes leasing a product for those customers who said I'll never lease. Leasing gets to a point, equipment cost gets to a point where plane engines are a great example. Nobody buys jet engines anymore; they lease them because those things can cost $400 to $1 million or more. And there's massive risk if you purchase and you don't have somebody to back up how to take that jet engine through a cycle. As assets get to be 190, 200, 210, if 2027 EPA requirements hit, Trucks could be 215 to 220,000 on a lease. So now if your bank's requiring a 10% or 20% down payment, you're 20 to 40,000 out of pocket for down payment. That's if your credit score is good enough to allow for that. And so there's a cash play up front that can be balanced against it within a lease. If you lease the right way, you have the support of what that leasing organization does to help support the asset through its life. And that's a really, really difficult thing to do, particularly for newer TSPs. If you don't have maintenance relationships established, good shops, trust with the shops. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that's really important. So from a cash perspective, for sure, leasing, a lot of them look just like finance terms. Our leases look just like a finance term, with the exception that you have a little bit of a limit to whatever liability there might be at the end of a residual. And you don't get tax benefits for it. We do have a product that offers capital leases, which provides you the exact same vehicle as if you're financing the truck through a bank. We don't give a lot of those. We do about 10 or 15% of our fleet that way a year. And that looks exactly like a finance loan. One of the things that you mentioned, and this is something interesting for Tyler and I, is there's always a balance at how, I don't want to say it the wrong way, but you want to pay as much as your cash flow will allow every month on any financing for a truck, because that's a depreciating asset. And the cycles of when that truck depreciates are very, very hard to gauge. We've just gone through about 18 months worth of very serious depreciation on trucks, meaning you buy the truck at 180,000, you walk off the lot and it's worth 140. And then it only comes down from there. And that was followed up by 2 years ago where used truck values were very, very high. We had a year in 2021 and early 2022 that used trucks were actually appreciating. You could buy a truck for 180, walk off the lot, it was worth 210. So you have to know those cycles. And to the point, when you say expensive, I'm not going to lease, it's too expensive, or whatever the commentary might be, you really have to look at how do you, as a heavy asset owner that depreciates, how do you ensure that you protect yourself long term in the financing of that asset so that you don't find yourself so far underwater at some point in the cycle that your business is unsustainable? And that usually happens when the truck comes due at the end of a financing term, or you have it on your books for a certain amount, or whatever it looks like in your financing terms and arrangements with your asset. How do you make sure that you stay above water on that asset as fast as you possibly can get above water?
Pat, I really want to dig into that, but I have to go back 2 steps because I'm not as quick as you guys. I'm not as fluent in this stuff. 2 questions, if you don't mind. I've met Tim Steiner and I've seen your REL Solution Center. And I've seen the technology that you guys use to monitor through, I think it's the Zonar. It's reporting back diagnostic info. I've learned from him what you guys do for helping people find repairs and tows and negotiating bills and warranties. Is that an add-on pay service? Is it bundled into the lease price? How does that work?
Yeah, that's actually included with every one of our leases, and primarily we want that included because that's the type of service that, quite honestly, maintains the quality of your truck and certainly maintains the quality of your business, because we can get it up and running and making sure it gets maintained. Plus, we have visibility. Like, we have visibility of alerts, so we can actually, because of the fact that it is tied into the CAN bus, we actually get alerts of what is happening with that truck even before the manufacturers. So you've heard us use this this example before, but someone does a pre-trip and everything is fine. They go out an hour later and their rear brake light is out. That's a 6-point CSA violation. We get that alert. We notify the point of contact, and we can assist in getting them into a shop and getting that replaced so that they don't have a violation or disrupt the service of their customer.
So why, Tyler, have I heard a price bandied about for the solution center per truck?
Say that, John?
Why have I heard in conversation that it's whatever it is, dollars per week per month? Is it because, do you do that for non-REL trucks?
Yes, we do both. We do both.
Oh,
Yeah, so we have a number of customers who have REL trucks and who have asked us to manage their maintenance events on their non-REL trucks. I think our biggest customer has, I don't know, 14 trucks leased with us out of 42 total.
Yeah.
His other 28 trucks are in our solution center. And for that, we charge a monthly subscription fee. It's about $100 a month, give or take. And a chunk of that is the data plan running through Zonar. Like anything else, those data plans are about as expensive as any other software platform.
gotcha. Okay, so it's normally bundled in though for at least.
Yeah, and we don't separate that out. That's on every lease truck that we have.
Now you mentioned a finance lease, and I think, am I right in that a finance lease is where you lease it for 3-4 years, whatever it is, and at the end you could buy the truck for $1 kind of thing?
No, we don't offer that. We again because you really want to manage cash flow. What we do on our leases is you can buy it out at the end of the term. You're obligated at the end of the term to a residual amount. So, example, if the truck cost is 180,000 and you're doing a 2-year team lease, after 2 years, that residual obligation lease ends. The residual obligation is whatever, $70,000 or $75,000. You owe that amount, regardless of what the truck might sell for. If it sells for 100, you've got equity in it. If it sells for 70, you've got a loss on what your obligation is, or you can release the truck.
So you're picking, like in that example, 70,000 because you have tables that tell you team truck X number of miles, 2 years. This is probably what we think the value would be, and that's
It's the most.
go for.
Yep, it's the art. That is for sure the art in the mix. There's enough science. Again, trucking cycles can go typically about 3 years. 2 of those 3 are going to be in pretty good shape. 1 of those 3 you'll probably have some risk. If you just go with the standard history of what have residual values been on trucks. Tell me the price of every 2-year-old or 4-year-old used truck every year. And it's not as simple as just saying, let's pull an average and say, let's do this over 20 years. There are other things to consider within it.
So if at the end of 2 years the truck's only worth 50, the TSP doesn't have to buy it.
TSP still owes the 75,000 residual on a capital lease. Capital leases look exactly like a loan with a balloon, and
So
that's how they're treated.
your typical lease that somebody does, the equity in REL, right? Somebody says, I'm going to pay you these payments for 2 years. They get to the end of 2 years. Can they say, it's been great, here are the keys?
Yep.
So if it was a $70,000 payment that they would owe you and it's worth 50, they can say, here are the keys, thanks so much. You took that risk.
No, they'll owe a component of the first loss. So our leases work with what's called liability limiters, and that's literally the effort. That's what separates a capital lease, in which the customer gets the depreciation for tax benefit versus an operating lease. So if the customer owes 70 and the truck's only worth 50, the customer has a first loss obligation of up to, I think it's 10% of the original purchase price of the truck, and that's their limit. So if they owe 70 and the truck is worth 50 and they bought the truck for 180,000, they'll owe a penalty of up to 18. REL takes on the remaining risk.
Okay. And if the truck's worth 80, they can buy it for 70 and smile all the way, right?
They can do whatever they want with it. Yeah, we would sell it on their behalf, and if we sell it for 80, the customer would get 70% of that over equity.
Okay.
And typically when used truck values are kind of in those, what we try to guide our customers through, and again, this is part of the art of really looking through what do we think FedEx is going to do. We try to guide our customers to what you would do. If you've got a 300,000 mile truck at the end of 2 years and your lease is up, and you owe 75 and the truck's only worth 50, why wouldn't you just release for 2 more years? Because your payments drop substantially on a second term. Literally 20,000 or more a year in enhanced cash flow, even though you're financing it. And 2 years from now, it's going to be 2027. What happens then? Used truck market's probably in great shape, and you've got an equity play in the truck.
Okay.
So it's really about talking with customers about what that ownership looks like and what equity looks like in the path of the truck.
So now I'm caught up. I can dig in and try to understand what you were telling me before. The dry powder avoiding being underwater equity wise on the truck. So if I'm assuming right, if it's like new cars, you have a depreciation. If the life of the thing is X number of years, it's not straight line. It looks like a rubber band that somebody's pushing down a little bit. So it's faster in the beginning and then slower in terms of the loss of value, right?
Typically.
Typically, right. And so how do you, because I'm guessing you as the lender, the lessor, you want to make sure that your customers are not underwater. Does that mean in a new, if it's a day cab and it's a 4-year lease, are the payments a lot higher in the beginning of the lease and they fall down later? Or how do you?
No. No. So what we do, John, is we look out and we try to balance where we think those used truck prices, basically liquidation value of those used truck prices, will be in 4 or 2 years, and we assess this about every quarter. Looking out in the future 2 years is really hard in this business. It's not science. You have to pay attention to the environmental factors, like the EPA in 27, for example. It's probably the clearest and the easiest target to look at. But there's other things like administrative changes, how to think about regulatory effects on in trucking as a whole, how to think about things like the assault on the independent contractor model versus joint employer or employees classification. All of that's really important to take a look at and think about what happens within the market. Big bankruptcies. There's been a couple of big ones, huge in the last 2 years. Yellow Freight was a big drain on day cabs, and then a large company in Canada that had thousands of trucks in the U.S. was a big drain on sleepers. Whenever events like that happen, there's a tail that takes the market for a while to get to some sort of stabilization. And those were big events. What we try to do is look at it and say, how can we price our trucks on a weekly cash flow basis that's highly competitive within the market, whether it's financing market, I'm going to go to a bank and I'm going to buy a truck, or whether it's a leasing market from one of the national competitors. And as we look at what pricing we see from them, what we try to do is kind of sit in the middle to say, okay, we're not just going to undercut. You could very easily change cash flow equations in any financing term. We could say, hey, you want to lease a team truck from us? We'll give you 7 years to zero. No team truck's going to last 7 years. Except, well, you and I know a friend who will get 1 million miles, but that's odd.
But he doesn't do team for that reason.
But and literally you could do something like that and look at it and say, if it costs in financing terms, call it $1,100-$1,200 a week on P&I costs, principal and interest costs for a truck. If you're going to run it as a team, you could run that in 7 years and you'd be paying $500, maybe $400. But that truck is dead in 2 years. So suddenly at the end of 2 years, you've got a 7-year term. You still owe $150,000 on a $180,000 truck, and the truck is worth $70,000. So all of a sudden you have not only destroyed your equity, but you have to pay that bill at some point in the future. Whether you're going to pay it when you sell the truck out for a loss and you still owe $100,000 more on it, or $80,000 more on it than what you're able to get for it, or you pay for it during the course of its use for the equivalent bargain. That's really the value where Tyler and I have tried to look at it and work every quarter on it to make sure that our pricing is where we need that to really be. And so in our trucks, team truck, for example, we've got a 2-year lease because we expect them to put 200 to 250,000 miles on them. That runs them to 400 to 500K. That's a pretty good time to look at trade. You don't start to get really bad. It's not great at 500,000 miles, but it's a hell of a lot better than 6. That's kind of the tipping point. And so what we look at is to say at the end of 2 years, the truck is that the residual amount's worth 75,000, but we're only seeing offers coming in for 65. We'll talk with customers and say, hey, you know what? We've got an option here to lease this for another 2 years. By the way, your secondary lease, your payments drop by about $2,000 a month because you've bought down such a large play of equity in that first 2-year cycle that the first 2 years, for example, you're going to buy down a big percentage of the debt. The second 2 years, you're buying down a much smaller percentage of the debt. And so at the end of it, you get into a truck that costs substantially less for P&I costs in its second term. It's higher miles, so your maintenance costs are going to be higher. And you've got the ability to moderate when you sell that truck out of the fleet to take advantage of cycles.
Yeah, John, if I can add a couple of things from a color standpoint, our motto is equity, right? We want you. We believe it's in the best interest beyond that first term. We think there's more value as you're continuing, as Pat talked about. When you refinance that truck, you're paying less, and eventually you have the opportunity to own that truck. And if you think about FedEx specifically, we started in 2020 all the way to the end of 2023. FedEx was growing. We're in COVID. There was lane opportunities. There was market share. There was more volume than you could imagine. And we had clients that never gave back those trucks. Number one, they're either making bank, going to the market and selling those trucks, or they're too busy adding new lanes that they would take that expired lease, add it to a new lane, add a brand new truck to their dedicated lane, and continuing to run. 24 was a change, right? There was reshaping, remolding, reconfiguring. As you look into 2.0, that model is probably going to resemble very closely what happened from 2020 to 2023. So our national providers, competitors, whatever you want to call them, they have a different model. They don't want you to own that equipment. They would prefer to have you take that lease, and they'll do everything in their power financially to kind of keep you and hold you to go on to another lease. In 2023, 55% of all of our new business came from those national providers. People that wanted to change. They wanted something different. They wanted to get value out of their equipment. And so we believe, the next 3 years, it's going to be back to where that truck expires in 2 years. They add another truck, but they're going to have 1, 2, 5 new opportunities to take that 2-year-old truck or 4-year-old truck and run it in lanes and have a lower cross growth model than just continuing adding new equipment.
And Tyler, this is why I wanted to have this conversation, because when I have conversations with TSPs, the parallels to me that I see, like if you talk to young home buyers, they go get a pre-qual letter and they say, oh, you're approved for X amount a month. And they go shopping for a payment. They're not looking for value in the home, just what payment can I afford? And I see a lot of TSPs who aren't financially sophisticated who are simply going, well, the bank said I could pay this much per month and REL wants this much per month. I take the lower one. It's like, well, wait a minute. The bank just financed you on a 7-year loan for a team. Like, they're not understanding the equity portion.
Right.
That's why I wanted to dig in and figure it out for myself to understand this.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Pat talked a little bit about residual, and we try to forecast as much as we can. What do we think the residual is going to be in the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, depending on the lease terms? We work with, we have 5 brands that we work with. So we've got 4 OEM retail partners that feed us information on what the used market is doing and what are they foreseeing to help give us the best guide. It still relies on certain general information. The condition of the truck, if you bring it back and everything's dented and broken in, the value is not going to be very high in that truck, regardless if it's through us or one of the other national brands. And mileage, if you do a 2-year, 500,000 mile team truck and you bring it back at 600,000 miles, that 100,000 miles is about a $10,000 residual impact. And we don't charge you for that. We have protection that you don't ultimately end up paying the entire amount because REL has that, beyond 10%. But if you take that truck back to the national provider, they're sure in the heck going to charge you 12 cents per mile, and it pretty much comes out the same, in many cases much higher from an expense standpoint. So there's different methods, different impacts. At the end of the day, we believe that it's the best interest for you after that 2 years to get it another 2 years, use it in the same dedicated operation, or move it into a growth model opportunity.
Yeah, John, it's an interesting, just to tack on to what you had said though, and Tyler's point. So one of the things you talk about a young couple buying a house, and these are houses. I mean, let's face it, it's you're going to spend 180 to 200 grand on a sleeper right now. You that scenario, we've seen that play out with a number of customers who have come to us in terms of upgrading equipment, who have had in the past have financed equipment and are significantly underwater. And the discussions that we have with them in terms of this is how you should be thinking about this have kind of been eye openers to them a little bit. We not too long ago, Tyler and I got a request from a customer person that we know, not a customer of ours, but we've talked with him in the past about leasing trucks. He's going through a sale of some of his lanes on a business, and he asked us. This is one of those flexibility things. He asked us if we would purchase his equipment and then bundle a new lease back to the acquiring person. So he gave us his spreadsheet of units along with remaining debt load on. They're $400,000 underwater. And we called, and this is about 10 trucks, and we called them and said, hey, walk us through a little bit about how you did this. And most of his was, I take out 5-year financing, and a couple of the trucks he'd been running his teams for a year or two, still owed bottom high, still owed $170,000 on the trucks, and they were worth about 80 or 90 on these couple of teams. He took a bunch. If you're running 500,000 miles or 250,000 miles a year, you're taking 500 to 600K in revenue on that truck. And worst case, between aggressive truck financing payments, fuel costs, driver wages, driver insurances, you're probably paying worst case about 400K. So you're already making a 30% margin on this thing that's getting 250,000 miles on net. Why would you not be aggressive on your payments? And what he did was, instead of that, was to take that margin in-house during that first 2 years, and now he's going to have to pay 80 grand of it back. And so, like, it gets back to what I said. You have to take the approach and look at it either way. You're either going to be paying it out at the end of the cycle with your truck, or you're going to be paying aggressively through the cycle to ensure that you're maintaining debt load to asset ratio or book value, depending on what your approach is.
Pat, I think I've recently heard a story about somebody trying to sell their business, and they've lost 4 or 5 buyers for a good business because no bank will lend because the trucks are so underwater. I'm wondering if it's the same person who came to you trying to solve that problem.
Yeah, I don't know.
Not important to this.
What worries me is those scenarios are, is your company and our company are really, we focus really hard on trying to educate. A lot of the effort that Tyler and I and our team puts into what it looks like on asset ownership, asset leasing. Same thing with Haldi-Tech, and why we're as affiliated as closely with you guys as we are, is we look at this as an educational opportunity for the people coming into the business that haven't been in the business before. And there's a lot of them. There's a lot of, kind of rookie truckers coming in to become truckers. And so how can we help accelerate their understanding of the business in terms of what to think about? And so there's probably what worries me is these stories everywhere. Somebody coming in, moving into equipment that's in poor position. They're quickly going to have to learn to adapt to that and make decisions quickly on that equipment. Hopefully, we can jointly through the Line Haul Summit and these other seminars make sure that we get people educated on what to ask about for equipment.
And John, let me just jump in here one minute. So the example Pat just gave is really an example about minimal cash flow, right? They're trying to reduce their weekly or monthly cost as much as they could. Maybe it was a position for a sale, whatever the arrangement or plan was, but the reality is that's just not our model. We want to minimize as much as we can, but at the end of the day, we're looking at your entire phase of success with that equipment, not only when you first lease it, but after that 2, 3, or 4 year mark, and whether you want to upgrade that equipment and get out of that truck, or minimize, reduce your payments and use it for an expansion. But we're looking at the whole picture, not just, hey, we can lower your cost each week, and then you're going to be so far underwater that it's going to be extremely challenging for you ever to catch up.
forgive me for drawing parallels, but my ADD brain likes to connect things, so I have models. I've learned a lot in the last 2 years about what captive insurance is for workers' comp. And my simplified version of it is they handpick the really safe folks. Because if you got 1,500 contractors, you have the whole spectrum of safe to not safe from a workers' comp perspective.
Right.
People who manage claims and do the right thing versus those who don't. You put them into one risk pool, and you have to come up with sort of one number to manage the whole risk. But if you can take the top 10% and put them in their own pool, they can pay a much better price because they've got really good workers' comp hygiene, if you will. They're doing the right thing. It sounds like your model is the same thing. You have a captive pool of lessees. Is that the right term? But you're helping to enforce good financial hygiene on them. And so then you can provide a much better product at a better price because back to what you said, I think you're either in or you're out. If you're in, it means you're agreeing to the terms, but your layer upon layer of the service and the monitoring and the uptime and all the other things, you're limiting your pool to who you can deal with. So the person who wants to be completely underwater with a 7-year term on a team, you're not going to do it because it's going to screw up the pool for the rest of them. Is that a fair way to conceptualize it?
Yeah, I think so. I think I think we look about it a little bit differently than a risk pool, but at the end, it kind of acts like one. Um, I said early that what we looked at with Tyler and I when we looked at the business was that our customers need access to a partner in asset ownership and management that has the ability to be flexible as their business changes over time. And that part of what we need to make sure we do is educate with our customers what that flexibility means. Does that mean that we're going to be flexible to allow for a 7-year lease on a sleeper? No, never. But if we can sit down with a customer and really talk them through what does it look like within the business in terms of this type of financing deal versus this one, we think we'll win every time. And it is difficult. John, you and I were talking a couple of weeks ago, and if you're just looking at a cash flow play, we're not going to be the best. We'll be competitive with the large nationals. We're not going to be somebody who acquiesces what we firmly believe in asset cost and residual values. We're not going to acquiesce to extend that because we know it's a losing state. That doesn't always fit, and in those cases we can't or won't be able to do business with those customers. But for those that really understand it or who want to sit down and listen and understand how our approach works, then they can make a more educated decision about which way they're going to head. The other thing I told you about, and I don't know that this is, I don't know if this is appreciated enough, especially by people that are coming in newer to the business, is I'm a firm believer that a new person coming in as a trucking owner, they don't recognize the true equity in their equipment until they've gone through at least 3 truck buying cycles. And the reason I say that is you don't earn equity on the first truck that you buy. If you're a lessee from a national provider, you're never going to get equity. You're giving that up as a component of the convenience of having a walk away. I'm going to lease it. It's going to be this amount. At the end of 3 years, I'm going to lease another one from them. As long as I lease another one, I'm not going to be responsible for most of the damage that may have been caused to the previous truck I did. Blah blah blah. It's safe, but you never get equity in the truck. You do the right things when you're financing a truck for ownership, for equity, and within about the 3rd truck that you have, most of that truck could be paid for by cash. It is very simple premise. You're going to earn 40 or 50,000 in margin on a truck. 3 trucks later, you're going to have 150 to 200,000 worth of equity. Maybe 4 trucks later, but that's an 8-year cycle on teams, and it could be a 15-year cycle on day cabs. It is not a get rich quick thing. It's something that you have to focus on and build for your business. If you're trying to do it the other way, there's 1,000 ways to get rich quick. Cash flow, that's all you're going to focus on and do it. You can do it. Not sure that you're going to get anything from an equity position when you sell your business.
I have another question. Forgive me. I know you're probably exhausted listening to my questions. Again, I've never bought or leased a truck. The escrow portion, is that all lessors do that?
No.
You do that though.
Mhm.
So somebody comparing buying versus REL, what is the escrow portion? How does that work? Because if they're looking at payment, that's in there, right?
Yes. So when we decided to build REL from a maintenance side of things, the typical lease, national brands and regional will require a percent per mile from a maintenance standpoint. And when you look at that, typically it's as low as 6.5 cents per mile. We've seen as high as 10 cents per mile, which is pretty significant. And so when we met with our OEMs and said, okay, on average, what are we going to expect our clients to pay for routine maintenance and preventative maintenance and tires and all the things associated with the truck? It came out to an average of about 3.5 to 4 cents. And we said, why would we collect 6.5 cents as a minimum, as high as the numbers we've heard, if that's not what truly they're going to spend? So we decided to come up with an escrow. It's their money. So we will help source and provide the support to get the maintenance done. We'll use our national brand pricing for tires and filters and other things to help reduce their costs. But at the end of the day, if a client wants to get some work done, we'll take it out of their escrow and we will send them the receipts for their monthly maintenance. And at the end of the day, we expect them to pay about 3.5 to 4 cents per mile through the terms of the lease. And then anything they don't spend gets returned to them against the national brands. They keep it, whether they did the maintenance or not. They keep the entire fund that was funded towards them.
Yeah, John, I think that's the complicated part. Is as Tyler said, if run every single preventive maintenance cycle recommended by your manufacturer in year one, you're probably going to spend about $2,000 on your truck, which on a 100,000-mile truck is a penny and a half to 2 cents. And year two, you're going to spend the same amount, basically the same preventive maintenance things that are done, oil changes and that sort of thing, but you're going to buy a set of tires, and the set of tires is going to be $5,000. All in over the course of these leases, Tyler's exactly right. Really, you're costing only preventive maintenance. Everything else is covered by warranty primarily, and driver damage you can't be, that's on you. But on the preventive maintenance side, it's really a very structured amount that's predictable. So why pay 8 cents or 9 cents or 10 cents? Well, there's burned up capital in brick and mortar that has to be recouped on national providers. We take a different approach. We've got about 3,500, Tyler, I think, shops that are in our network now.
Yep.
All of the manufacturers and dealerships, all of the franchise shops, et cetera. And we've negotiated through most of them on the national side with national account pricing to effectively act like that, but in a more flexible way for us. John Haldy has a great shop, charges great rates. We have talked to the shop and we think that they can do the work that is required to do for preventive stuff. We'll add John's shop into our network and we'll do your PMs at your shop that you like. So there's, again, for us, it's this flexibility where we do the things that the customer wants to do, but we reject going down a path that we know is the wrong path from an asset ownership perspective. The large nationals, by the way, won't tell you what that maintenance cost is. They'll tell you 8 cents a mile. You'll see that in the contract. Hopefully you recognize that's $8,000 to $10,000 a year in your lease payments that are going to be built in.
So, I mean, this is why I wanted to get to the heart of this, because I get so frustrated. I know that there are really, really, really smart TSPs who love REL. And I know that they're too savvy to simply love REL because Joe and Rachel and Emily and Tyler and Pat are great people and they don't care how they spend their money. That's not what they're doing. And yet I hear other people who don't know REL and they say, oh, they're too expensive. I heard they're X dollars a week for a day cab or a team truck. And I wanted to understand the value prop because I think that they're taking the ultra simplistic view of what's the weekly payment and they're not looking at the value they get. Now I understand it better. I think they're being ding dongs for not calling you and understanding this.
Well, yeah, we appreciate that. We wish they'd all call us too, but so out of our payments, about 20% of our payments, whatever you might have heard, about 20% of our weekly payments are built into two components, which truthfully we have taken a relook at on how we talk about it. One of those is physical damage, in 2023, we have a physical damage program that we can bundle into the price of our lease. We bundle that in as a part of the weekly payment. We're going to take that out and provide the information to the customer to say, hey, go shop your rate around, because we'll win that about 80% of the time, knowing the rate's out. But shop that rate around and then come back if you're interested, and we'll put it into your lease payment. And then the other one is this maintenance escrow, where if you compare principal and interest cost of our financing term to the P&I cost of most of your other places that you go out and look, it's going to be very, very close. We might be way lower than some, we might be higher than others. And again, part of that, John, goes to the structure of your financing. If a bank is going to give a contractor or a TSP a 5-year loan on a truck that they intend to use as a team sleeper, their weekly cash is going to be way lower. And at some point, depending on the cycle that they're selling that truck within, there's going to have to be a reckoning of the accounting of how much do you owe on your loan remaining and how much is the truck valued at. Because the truck is only going to last maybe 3 years, unless again you're a million miler plus and you can get a little more time out of that. So I think it's a great point that you bring up. We'd love to have those conversations, and we do have a lot of them. One of the Tyler's and Emily came up to Tyler and I earlier today. She said, "Listen, so what I'm hearing from the folks that I'm talking to that have these contracts with these other nationals are once we get through the pricing and they understand where we sit versus where the others sit and recognize that we're at par or a little bit better on what it looks like for cash, and there's an equity play that they're entitled to at the end of their term, we get over that hump." The comment is, I can't wait to be, once their other contracts ends, I can't wait to be working with somebody who's on my side. Meaning they always feel like they're butting heads with their other providers about nickel and diming stuff that they never had those discussions about. Our customers get right to it. Me or Tyler aren't needed. They have it. Most of them have our numbers.
Right.
So it's easy to talk through that. And that value is really important from our perspective. And from our perspective, we'll continue to scale that as REL grows.
Yeah, and we're never going to criticize someone's business decision and how they're going to, maintain or grow their fleet. We obviously can't provide all the purchase asset capabilities that's required out there. We can do a little bit, as Pat talked a little bit earlier, in capital. But what we do believe we are is we're probably, I believe, one of the best customer-focused leasing providers out there. And we care about our customers. We care about their success. We're available 24/7. And we help many customers in many different ways that don't even lease with us. So it's more than just getting a lease from someone. We want to build a community. We want to build a community about trust, because we know at some point they're going to look for a leasing option. And we just hope they think about us first and give us the opportunity to learn more about REL.
Gentlemen, I can't thank you enough. I finally think I get it. And it makes so much more sense now. And you've both been very generous to put up with newbie questions from me. But I'm delighted that we recorded this and that others might be able to benefit from understanding it, because I know it's not always possible to get you guys for an entire hour like I just did. So a million thanks, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Awesome, John.
I'll see you next week.